That's a free good gel. That goes straight to jail. You're not that good. He says his better faster than the bad boy. That bad boy's running. Got a big old 60-inch blade deck on it.
Oh, right here. I'll do it for you.
We operate under the guidelines, unless there is gold, oil, or drugs involved.
Miss out, and you got FOMO, you better jump on the 150, you better hurry. Jump on the 150, because if you got to 100, and they create this like FOMO, fear of missing out. They're doing that on purpose.
You know, who is this? You know, why are you calling this number?
I think. Why would you? Oh shit! It just went down 100%. I better get on the 150. You better hurry. You know.
But that.
And so we kind of pissed me off a little bit. You know, but now I'm like, oh shit! You better go 150. You better go 100. Thank you.
Don't do it.
Well, that's what they're creating by doing that. Like, why would you get okay, from a sales standpoint, from a sales standpoint, I would just send out an email. If anybody wants to get on the 250 for 3 months, 250% for 2 months, please jump on it the next week because we're going to be taking this off. So then that would create the FOMO even more. Like, oh shit, we got a week. No, there's timing involved. There's a ticking clock. Oh shit, I better get on it. Now, oh shit, I'm gonna miss out. Okay, and so that would have been the proper. Sales people are creating a sense of emergency.
Right. Urgency.
Urgency. Yes. Right. Oh shit, there's only one left and there's a ticking clock left. And there's only one, they do on the shopping network all the time. There's only 5 left, because there's only 30 seconds.
Limited supply, while supplies last, act now.
You know? So that was
Price subject to change.
People, and this is for not exclude people like me that are sitting there contemplating, and, you know, and then I'm like, well, I should have done it Friday. But I didn't want to get involved in the weekend deals with me for
Signal flags, driving up the road. Your mother-in-law dog, you pick up on it and go, oh, subversion, huh? Subversion, babe. You got 50 subversion, right?
What do you need? That's cool, you got paid out. Your time goes regardless. And
I get all them damn brown people out of here. Go bring us this white South African. Let's bring it over them white South Africans. Oh, that just happen to be Zionist Jews. That's what we need to be more of them.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, cause you got other.
No, because I know a little bit more about the drive on that. That's not why they made the change. Nothing. Whatsoever. Just like squirrels still drive.
Well, it's still in human nature.
Yeah.
This is a new number. Where did you get this information? The reverse fishing.
You're gonna need the full 2 hours pretty much to get all that done, right?
Well, the sooner I get going, the better.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna ask you what size 15.
All over there.
This place, right here.
Wait for fancy, but you go for my back.
Like when I was telling you that wives and children. And they're like, what do you want? You know. I go, well, how many cards do you have? I got 4 cards. I'm looking on to that.
Well, the fact that you actually
$250 there for them 2.5 cards.
You got ice for little pictures.
Okay, we're gonna get started now. Lynn's gonna finish up his presentation from last week.
Come on!
So let's give Glenn, Jason, let's give Glenn a warm welcome. What's your quick announcement?
Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special speaker today. Some people might know him from Sovereign Levy. Other police departments know him from around the local area and fear him. Everybody give it up for Glenn Fern!
You're Glenn Fern!
Wow. Glenn, can you live up to that announcement of your name and here he is?
Wow, that's a pretty tall order there, that's for sure. Okay, so this is actually a continuation of the one that we did last week. So I'm going to skip through all of this stuff. We already went through it, and talk about how bar members are foreign agents of the Roman cult. And we ended right here. So we were talking about my exclusive content. Start right here. I have exclusive content available on howtube.com. It's $9.99 a month for the videos, plus unlimited email consultations. But I'm not a liar. Well, I'm a lawyer. No, I'm a liar. But I can't tell you what I would do under certain circumstances and where to find the forums. The only power these New World Order Satanists have over us is through fraud and deception. My agenda is to expose it for all our benefit, but I cannot fight all the battles. Some of my exclusive content is Arlington private information share, land deed training, estoppel certificates training, foreclosure estoppel certificates training, corporate denial training, toll roads notice and demand training, invoice training, notice of void judgment training, revocation of signatures training, third-party witness training, federal habeas corpus training, revocation of voter registration, criminal complaint training. I've got probably 3 or 4 videos about that. Lawsuit training, I got 1 video on that, and I probably need to do some more. Other training, I'm open to requests, but it's got to be something that's within the scope of my channel and something that I already haven't done. And I've got about 600 videos up there, so I've done a lot, let me tell you. Northeast private information share videos, some of those are going to be exclusive, some are going to be public. Petition for writ of mandamus, I need to do one of those. I just filed or prepared a petition for writ of prohibition for someone that I'm helping, so we'll see what happens with that. Videos taken down by YouTube. YouTube took down, I don't know, probably about 10 or 15 videos. This exclusive, HowTube has about 150 videos up there right now. First views of new uploads, all forms, files, and other instructions are available for free, linked either in my videos in the show notes or on my website. All exclusive content's available on howtube.com, and you can buy a subscription there. I have no control over HowTube and how they do the billing or anything. I used to be able to accept cryptocurrencies on my website subscription. I can still actually accept, but my website only has about maybe 30 videos. There's not that many that are on my website. The real bulk of the videos are on HowTube. Of the ones that are the exclusive are on HowTube. Anyways, it's Sovereignty International HowTube. So what they're doing right now, all these courts, if you think about it, are a comparatorium. Okay, that's in the civil law. Okay. So remember, Roman law, civil law, Roman civil law are convertible phrases, and they're talking about municipal law, right? So you might as well say Roman law, right? When it says civil law, you might as well say Roman law. Comprises a judicial inquest. Okay, remember it's an inquisition, so that means it's an inquest made by delegates or commissioners to find out and relate the truth of a cause. And that's Holthouse, a New Law Dictionary. So an inquest has people on it that decide it. That's why, like these 6-man juries that they have in these municipal courts, that's an inquisition, okay? Because that's not a 12-man common law jury, and it's not a trial by jury where the jury conducts the trial. Therefore, by definition, that's an inquisition, okay? Because the judge tells the jury what to do, what they're going to look at, all that stuff. And if the jurors don't do what the judge tells them, he can actually put them in jail. Roman or papal states, okay? I actually prepared an amicus curiae for Darren to file for this guy that we're helping. He's in prison in Chicago, and it's about the unconstitutionality of of Roman law. Okay, it's unconstitutional for Roman law to be in America because it comes from the Vatican. And the First Amendment says that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. So then, by definition, it's unconstitutional. So Roman or papal states stretch across the central part of the Italian peninsula in an oblique direction from the Adriatic to the Mediterranean, between Tuscany, Modena, Lombardy on the northwest, and Naples on the southeast area. 17,822 square miles. Population in 1833 was 2,742,000. The capital was Rome, with a population of 153,000. Government is an elected monarchy. The Pope, for the time being, the absolute sovereign, with a consulting assembly of cardinals. And this is Waterston Encyclopedia of Commerce and Mercantile Law, 1863, page 582. So it gets better. Rome, the capital of the Pope's territories and of Italy. So it's the capital of Italy and the Pope's territories, and anciently the Milrus of the Roman Empire. And then east longitude 13, that's on the face of the earth, where it can be found. Rome is still a large and fine city, though not to be compared to ancient Rome. The streets are spacious and magnificently built. It has 5 bridges over the Tiber. I gotta mute this thing.
So Glenn, what you're saying is Rome today is not the same location as Rome back then. It's close, probably.
No, it is the same.
It is the same location, okay.
So 5 bridges over the Tiber, 20 gates, 300 churches. I've been to Rome. Okay, I actually went to the Colosseum.
And the Colosseum's actually in the city of Rome too.
Absolutely.
Okay.
There was parts of it that were blocked off. You couldn't get into it, but you could see where the floor had fallen in. And but the building was all there. Okay, but there'd been earthquakes, and so it had problems. Anyways, 5 bridges over the Tiber, 20 gates, 300 churches, a vast number of palaces, convents, triumphal arches, pillars, obelisks, statues, and theaters. And that's the 1773 Encyclopedia Britannica, volume 3, page 632. So now this is when they were signing the Declaration of Independence, right? So let's keep going here. Pontifically, okay, this is 1830 Johnson's English Dictionary, page 707, the state and government of the Pope of Rome. Okay, so the Roman law is issued by what is now the Vatican, and I'm going to explain that further. This is taken from Wikipedia. During and after the revolutions of 1848, sentiment on the peninsula grew for the establishment of a unified Italian kingdom. Southern Italy had not been united with northern Italy since the early medieval period, being mostly under the rule of the Kingdom of Naples and the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies. Modern Italy in the early 19th century came under the domination of the King of Sardinia, which, besides its namesake island, also ruled the expansive Piedmont and Savoy regions along the French-Italian borderlands. The formerly Republican leader in southern Italy, Giuseppe Garibaldi, made common cause with the House of Savoy to overthrow the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies, and the people voted in a plebiscite to join Sardinia to form the Kingdom of Italy in 1861, right? 1861, that's when the southern states walked out of Congress, remember? The Papal States and the city of Rome were annexed to the kingdom in 1870. So think about it. What happens if a state joins the Union? Does that state change? Absolutely not. If anything, it has to do certain things to become part of the Union under the Constitution.
Annexed.
Right. But we don't know what kind of, probably no constitution under the Kingdom of Italy. It's a king, right? Anyways, this kingdom lasted until the aftermath of World War II, when the 1946 Italian institutional referendum ended the monarchy. So then it became an elected democracy, I guess, which is what they're today. You see what I'm saying? So the Rome has always been where the Vatican was, and parts of these cities that were part of the papacy, part of the papal states. They might be part of Italy now, but they're still Roman law, and it all comes from what is now the Vatican. Okay, Roman law comes from what is now the Vatican. The history of Italy, in the meantime, the Pope being formed in several cities in the ecclesiastical state. It's an ecclesiastical state, so think about this. This is taken from a set of books I've got on my collection of law dictionaries, called The Modern Part of a Universal History from the Earliest Account of Time Compiled from Original Writers, Volume 26, page 16, 1761, right? So this is just before the War of Independence. So in the meantime, the Pope being informed that the several cities in the ecclesiastical state. So what I'm saying is that it's an ecclesiastical state. The papal state is an ecclesiastical state. Incurs the league of the Ghibellines and expelled the governors appointed by him, and had chosen others. He published a severe edict against them, and that was in 1319. So the history of Italy, this is in volume 26, page 49. As the ecclesiastical state was at this time almost wholly usurped by different princes in the city of Rome, a scene of confusion and uproar, the Romans, upon the account of a great dearth, having stoned their senator to death. So obviously there was lots of turmoil in Rome. And Innocent, okay, that was Pope Innocent, sent Cardinal Egidius Alvarez, a Spaniard descended from the ancient kings of Leon, and his legate into Italy, appointing him vicar over all the ecclesiastical state, with full power of assembling an army and opposing the unjust possessors of the territories of the church. So anyway, so this is the kind of stuff you would expect from a dictator, basically. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
This is talking about Boniface in 1403, and again, it's referring to the ecclesiastical state. And this is page 363 in 1568, talking about the ecclesiastical state. This is volume 25, talking about the ecclesiastical state. And this one's interesting. In 1198, Cardinal, remember, actually, this is wrong. This should be 1298. This is interesting because remember we talked about the Magna Carta? Because remember what happened with the Magna Carta? Okay. King John did the concessions to the Pope, right? Agreed to pay the Pope 1,000 marks a year. This is alluding to this. 1298, Cardinal Locarius was chosen Pope and takes the name of Innocent III, okay? Innocent was the third, was the one that King John was dealing with, okay? He receives allegiance from the prefect of Rome and requires homage from all in the ecclesiastical state. Innocent III, when he became Pope, was like in his 30s. He was really young, because it talks about it in here. But anyway, so libertas ecclesiastica is a frequent phrase used by our old writers to signify church liberty or ecclesiastical immunities, the right of investiture extorted from our kings by force of papal power, right? So again, the Pope was doing stuff. You saw what we talked about with the papal bulls, Dum Diversas, and these other papal bulls that they were issuing, basically authorizing the enslavement of people. This is talking about, this is taken from Tomlin's Law Dictionary. was at first the only thing challenged by the clergy as their libertas ecclesiastica, but by degrees under weak princes and prevailing factions, under the title of church liberty, they contended for a freedom of their persons, possessions, and all secular power and jurisdiction, as appears by the canons and decrees of the council held by Boniface, Archbishop of Canterbury. Okay, now we're talking Archbishop of Canterbury is the Church of England now. At Merton, AD 1258, and at London, AD 1260, and this is quoted in Littleton's history. Okay, Littleton is Coke, Lord Coke in the 1500s. And this is taken from Tomlin's Law Dictionary, 1835 edition. Bishop in the Church of Rome, the Pope has the chief right of electing bishops. Nevertheless, some princes had reserved to themselves the right of nominating to bishoprics, after which the Pope sends his approbation and the bulls to the new bishop. Right? The bulls are his decrees. That's again that 1773 Encyclopedia Britannica. Get a load of this. This is Tomlin's Law Dictionary, 1835 edition. So we're talking about Innocent III, right? And not long after this, by a general excommunication of the king and people for several years, because they would not suffer an archbishop to be imposed upon them. And it doesn't say king, okay? I put in king in square brackets. John was reduced to such straits that he surrendered his kingdoms to Pope Innocent III to receive them again and hold them of him under the rent of 1,000 marks, right? This is why that's talking about the concessions to the Pope in 1213. And that's Tomlin's Law Dictionary, 1835 edition. So you see where all of this is coming together. So they went and, they excommunicated, if I was John, I'd say, well, thank you very much. Get the heck out of here, then.
He basically abdicated his throne and authorities to the Pope.
That's
to
right.
Basically lease them back, like let's
Yeah.
look at it as a business
Yeah.
transaction.
Yeah.
He sold his property to the trust, and the trust is going to lease it back to the LLC.
Right.
With this, am I right?
Yeah, what a scam, eh?
How clever.
Fictions of law.
Gee, where did
Fictions
I-
of law. What's that minor estate? That's a fiction of law. Get a load of this one. This is definition number 3. This is in Bouvier's Law Dictionary, 1856 edition. Fictions were invented by the Roman praetors. Okay, so that means it's Roman law, who, not possessing the power to abrogate the law, were nevertheless willing to derogate it. Remember, in those other definitions, it says that it is well established that any law and derogation of common law becomes
Quad hoc,
quad hoc. That's right.
a court of limited jurisdiction.
That's right.
That's right.
Under the pretense of doing equity, under the pretense, okay, they're doing it's a sham. Fiction is the resource of weakness, which, in order to obtain its object, assumes a fact, what is known to be the contrary to be the truth. When the legislator, so remember, under a bill of attainder, it has to be a legislative act. Well, it's when the legislator desires to accomplish his object. It is a legislative act. He does not feign, he commands. Fiction of law owe the origin to the legislative usurpations of the bench. And that's Bouvier's Law Dictionary again, okay? So they're legislative usurpations. That's a bill of attainder by definition. Fictions of law, this is definition 4. It is said that every fiction must be framed according to the rules of law, and that every legal fiction must have equity for its object. And that's 10 Coke 42, that's Coke in the 1500s. To prevent their evil effects, they are not allowed to be carried further than the reasons which introduce them necessarily require. And that's Bouvier's Law Dictionary, 1856 edition again. So, and this continues to this day. This is the Lateran Pact, the sovereignty and exclusive jurisdiction over Vatican City, which Italy recognizes as pertaining to the Holy See, forbid any intervention therein on the part of the Italian government, or that any authority over that of the Holy See shall be there acknowledged. So they're basically, this is the 1929 Litecoin Pact. That was 1929. So that was before, that was like the Second World War, and it was before it was the Kingdom of Italy at the time. Fiduciary. Did you know that fiduciary? Remember we were talking about the that guy that'll go into court, and when they call the name, he says, "I'm a fiduciary of a trust with that name, and I hereby appoint you to be trustee." Well, see, he's talking Roman law. Okay, right. Fiduciary comes from Roman law. The term is borrowed from the civil law, which is Roman law. The Roman law is called the fiduciary heir, the person who instituted heir, who is charged to deliver the succession to a person designated by a testament. Talking about dead things. See what I'm saying? Says that fiduciary heirs properly signifies the person to whom a testator has sold his inheritance under the condition that he should sell it to another. Fiduciary may be defined to be in trust incompetent. So they're talking about basically a escrow. Okay, you see what I'm saying? It's someone that you sold it on the condition that he sells it to somebody else, and so it's escrow. Sounds like to me.
Right.
Anyways, Bouvet's Law Dictionary, 1856 edition. So this is all Roman law, and it's unconstitutional. Without a formal and sufficient indictment or information, a court does not require subject matter jurisdiction, and thus an accused may not be punished for a crime. And that's U.S. Supreme Court. So the issue is that it's Roman law, okay? That's how you know when they have defects in the indictment, when they have defects and all this stuff. Well, that means that's how you know that it's really not a court case. It's an inquisition under Roman law. And in fact, it's municipal law, and which is by definition Roman law. And so people don't realize that's what's going on. So like no true bill, or the indictment's not signed, the judge modified the indictment, which Joe was familiar with. No receipt from the court reporter. That's what Randy Kelton suggests to do, is get a receipt, get them to disclose the receipt from the court reporter that's supposed to be recording the grand jury proceedings. Because technically all grand juries are supposed to be in secret. So they can't really give you the transcript, they can't tell you anything about it, but they can produce a receipt for the court reporter. If there was in fact a grand jury proceeding, then there should be a court reporter that was there. If the record does not show upon its face the facts necessary to give the court jurisdiction, they'll be presumed not to have existed. You have to object, and it has to be on the record before trial. Okay, so if you don't object to it before trial, then the courts have ruled that you can't bring it up. But if you object to it in writing, that's why we're doing with this friend of ours in Chicago that we're helping. We're filing notice of objection to this, notice of objection to that, and the amicus curiae that I prepared for Darren to file is basically bringing up that it's all unconstitutional because it's Roman law. And why? The Republican is the only form of government which is not eternally at open or secret war with the rights of mankind. Let's see what's got on the comments on YouTube. Okay, nothing serious. So my new book is now available, called Trump, a True American Patriot or Not. Mike Blackwell asked me to write the book, and it took me about 6 weeks to write the book, because all I did is I took a lawsuit and manipulated it and turned it into the book. So it's 99% provable facts. I use court cases, law dictionary definitions, international treaties, stuff like that to prove everything I say in there. Although there is some opinion, and we'll talk a little bit about it further on here. This is the back of the book. Mike hired a company to help us publish the book, and they wrote the back here, and I think they nailed it when they said it here, and that's why I'm going to read it. It's pretty small and hard to read for people, but it says, in Trump, a True American Patriot or Not, Glenn Byrne and Mike Blackwell reveal the depths of corruption, deceit, and manipulation infesting our political system for hundreds of years, regardless of political affiliation. Read the hard evidence that it exposes how our elected officials sold Americans into slavery. Understand the founding fathers' true intent when they formed a republican form of government. Discover the influence of the satanic Roman cult on our politicians and political system. Does Donald Trump want to transfer power back to we the people? And Trump, you will see the great battle that is upon us. And I think they absolutely nailed it there. Anyways, you can order the book from Amazon.com or my website. It's $40 plus shipping. Obviously, my website's better. Amazon doesn't give you autographed books. Do you want to know the origins of the deep state? Who's behind it? Do you want to know why it's called the Trump administration? We talked about that in the earlier part of this presentation. An administration is for dead things, and it's by the Vatican. It comes from Roman law again. Do you want to know what an administration is? Do you want to know how Trump came to be president? You know, he was invited, right? He talks about that, actually. He said that there was actually about 200 generals at the time that had invited him. But there's actually a YouTube video with Jerome Corsi. I don't know how many of you ever heard of Jerome Corsi. He's a guy that lives up in the Northeast. He's got a PhD in political science from Harvard. He's written a bunch of books, got a website, YouTube channel. Anyways, there's a YouTube video where he says that in 2015, 5 generals came to see him, and they said they were going to overthrow Obama. And he said, well, you can do that if you want, but you might want to go talk to Donald Trump first. And 3 months later, he gets a phone call. They decided not to overthrow Obama because Donald Trump had agreed for him for president. So, and that's a YouTube video. So, you want to know who owns Congress? Have you ever noticed? Remember, Pelosi would get up there and say, we can't read this bill until after we pass it. Well, why do you think that is? That's because the owners were telling her what to do. Think about it. Do you want to know why they're called law enforcement officers? You know, I've got a law of war manual that's about that thick. I'm sure you know what the law of war manual is. Anyways, you look in there, it talks about law enforcement officers all over the place. Do you want to know how you have become a slave? If you're paying taxes, you're being forced to work for them for nothing. That's slavery. That's the definition of slavery. I brought that up in my first Supreme Court case when I went to the Supreme Court. I sued the IRS, and they don't want to talk to me now. And I kind of like it that way. They don't ask, and I don't tell.
Is that technically correct? Is it slavery or peonage?
Sorry?
Is it slavery or peonage?
Well, you know, I use slavery, but it could be peonage too. You're right. Yeah, good point. Yeah. Do you want to know what the root cause of the War of Independence was? It's the same thing that's going on right now. And you know what they say, the more history repeats itself. Do you want to know why every president goes to visit the Pope on their first international trip? They do. Matter of fact, Trump is on his first international trip, but I don't think he's going to see the Pope. He might, though. I don't know. But they always.
His first trip was to France because of what's going on in Burkina Faso.
Was it?
Yep.
It was on CNBC. It's saying that it's his first international trip right now and he's gone to Saudi Arabia. He's gone to the Middle East.
Because they don't want to report on what's going on.
He went within 2 days of swearing in. He went over to meet with Macron about what's going on in Burkina Faso because Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger have formed an alliance together. Kicked all the French troops out. Kicked all the American troops out. Kicked all the gold miners and uranium miners and cobalt miners out and have repatriated their resources and everything. And now you have the United Nations calling a special concession, a special conference for all the leaders because they got to go and, squash the uprising, that's happening in Africa.
That's interesting.
Out of South Africa.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I know China has told us that they're not going to export there's minerals, there's rare earth minerals that there's very few places that they're available. There's places in Africa you can get them, and China is refusing to export their rare earth minerals, which means that we got to go to Africa to get them, which makes us.
Now Africa, they've got Namibia, and not the Democratic Republic of Congo, but Congo. They've got Ethiopia or Somalia. You know, they've got all of these countries now that are saying, hey, you know what? Us too. We're done with you guys. I mean, it's big time. Dude.
Good.
It is big time.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So, anyways, I already told you about Mike Blackwell, and I told you about Jerome Corsi. I told you about the 95% provable facts, some opinion. Howard Hughes, David Wilcock actually has some of his videos about, remember Howard Hughes was hiding out all the time? And my opinion is that all of these billionaires, when they get to be billionaires, they get approached by the New World Order crowd and they get told you're going to go along with our program or you're going to turn up dead. And you remember Bill Gates went to see Warren Buffett? And then afterwards, Warren Buffett donated like $5 billion to the Gates Foundation. Remember that? But then since then, they've had a falling out. I don't know what happened with the $5 billion that went to the Gates Foundation, but I know that they had a falling out, and Gates is talking about liquidating the foundation lately.
Yeah, and it used to be Bill and Melinda Gates, but they got divorced.
Yes, they did. So anyways, so there's a falling out that's happened. But anyways, my opinion is that all these billionaires get approached by the New World Order crowd and get told, you're going to go along with our program, you're going to turn up dead. And Howard Hughes, what happens is that Howard Hughes got blackballed after World War II. According to David Wilcock, he got blackballed that he couldn't get any defense contracts. Remember, he was big-time defense contractor. And so he went and got some young girls to sleep with the military-industrial complex types to find out from Pillow Talk what was going on. And that's when he found out that they were planning on, they wanted to kill off 90% of us, the stuff on the Georgia Guidestones, right? They wanted to turn the earth into a global plantation and all that stuff. And so Howard Hughes had a set of manuals published, and Kennedy was implementing them. Remember, Kennedy circulated $6 billion worth of U.S. Treasury notes. That's like telling the New World Order crowd, you're done here. You know what I mean? And so they killed him. They killed his brother. They killed a bunch of other people. And so that's, why Howard Hughes was hanging out. That's my opinion. That's why he was hiding out, because he figured he was next. And same thing similar with Donald Trump. With Trump, there was a helicopter crash in 1984. Now, I happen to know a little bit about helicopters. I started out working on helicopters as a mechanic in 1976. I know I'm dating myself, but I started out working on helicopters as a mechanic in 1976. And so I know helicopters crash for a lot of reasons. I've seen helicopter crashes, like real close. And this helicopter crashed because the blades came off. Well, the blades never come off of helicopters, okay? There's life-limited parts in the rotor heads. There are life-limited parts. After a certain period of time, they have to be replaced no matter what, so before they get fatigued. You see what I'm saying? And so...
you know what happened to that helicopter over New York that had the banker and his family on it just like a month ago?
I don't know.
The props came off of it? Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. And he was some high up in Siemens or something.
No, he was in the IMF.
Well, that's
one of the big bankers in the IMF.
Wow, that's interesting. That's definitely sabotage.
Of course.
Because the blades don't come off of helicopters. What the biggest problem on helicopters? The biggest problem on helicopters is they have a tail rotor drive shaft to the tail rotor, and those bearings sometimes seize up. So as a mechanic, those bearings have temperature sensitive paint on them, and we're supposed to check those things every time we do a pre-flight. Right. We're supposed to check those things, and if that paint is discolored, that helicopter ain't going anywhere.
Right on.
Until that paint is replaced. There's chip detectors in the gearboxes. There's all sorts of stuff to be able to tell if there's a problem. And helicopters can actually climb up to, they can go 30, 40,000 feet. But the problem is up at that altitude, you need oxygen, and it's unpressurized. Helicopters aren't pressurized. And plus, if you get a chip light when you're at 30,000 feet, it takes you a long time to come down, okay? I mean, unless the blades fall off or the gearbox falls off or something like that. But so you don't, usually they fly pretty close to the earth, because if they get a chip light or something like that, they can get down pretty quick to, see, what they do is they have a thing called auto rotation too. They can actually come down from any altitude with no engine power. It's called auto rotating, where the blades actually go faster. They'll speed up, and they'll act as a windmilling effect to slow the airplane going down. And what happens is a helicopter can actually land, if it's more than 50 feet above the air, it can come down on auto rotate down and land and have enough momentum in the blades to pull pitch and go over top of telephone pole and land again. And that's because of the auto rotation. But that's why they don't want to be up, because the fastest they can come down is auto rotating, which is not very fast. And so they don't like to get up very high, but they can actually go up to like 30, 40,000 feet. But usually 10,000 feet is about max. And even at 10,000 feet, it takes a while to come down. So in reality, they're not after me, they're after you. I'm just in the way. Thank you, Donald Trump. For those who have been wronged and betrayed, I am your retribution. So this is what happened. I don't know if you remember. I don't think I'm going to talk about this, but I don't know if you remember when the election got stolen. They were talking about Sidney Powell went home at night expecting to come back to sign the Insurrection Act the next day. And remember, Trump was invited by 200 generals, so he had meetings with the generals at night. Matter of fact, I was listening to a 107 video, and 107 said that he sleeps about 3 hours every night, and that's about it. 107 didn't say it. Donald Trump Jr. Somebody asked him, "Does your dad ever sleep?" And Donald Trump Jr. said about 3 hours every night, and that's it. Anyways, so what 107 said is that Trump used to meet with generals in the middle of the night all the time. It sounds to me like the ones that invited him to run. You know what I mean? Anyways, they told him that he could, certainly within his power, to sign the Insurrection Act, but that they believed that if he did, that we would be within a civil war within 6 months, just like when Lincoln signed the Insurrection Act, that we were in a civil war within 6 months. And they had gamed out all sorts of civil war scenarios, and the Republic does not survive. So Trump decided not to sign the Insurrection Act. He needed to wake the people up. And so then, about 18 months before his first indictment, he came out with this meme right here, okay? So he's jerking their chain, right? He's jerking their chain, and he's really good at that, you know? For those who've been wronged and betrayed, I'm your retribution. I'm going to go after the deep state when I get back into office. So he's jerking their chain. And so his job, think about it, his job was to jerk their chain and get them to expose themselves. And so they say they've got everything. Q used to say in those Q posts, they used to say that we've got it all. Anyways, so two enemies of the people are criminals and government. So let us tie the second down with the chains of the Constitution, so the second do not become the legalized version of the first. Well said. And isn't that what's really happened? Think about it. This Roman law, the second has become the legalized version of the first. The greatest danger to American freedom is a government that ignores the Constitution. So all court cases are warfare. You are the enemy. You got to understand, any court case, you're at war. They're your enemy. They're not your friends. You never, ever tell the enemy what you're going to do. Never. You sandbag the bastards. Set them up and sandbag them. Any violations of their procedures or denials of due process of law. And they never follow their own codes. Darren knows that. We help people all the time, and they never follow their own codes. Those are all denials of due process of law. I've never seen any case where they followed their own codes. Yes. Somebody say something? Want to say something? Okay. A republic, if you can keep it. The corrupt star chambers of courts of England require defendants to have counsel. What do they? First thing they try and do is assault you with one of their bar members. Star Chamber stood for swiftness and arbitrary power. It's a limitation on the common law. Although the right to self-representation is not a license to abuse the dignity of the courtroom, neither is it a license for the court to impose upon the defendant his own counsel of choice, his own choice of counsel. This defendant's Sixth Amendment right to choose counsel or to proceed pro se is an essential part of his right to a fair trial. A republic is the button has already been clicked, otherwise it'll be red. The arrow is pointing at the bell, and that's for notifications, so you got to click it for notifications. A bill of attainder. Remember, we were talking about legislative acts, right? I guess we didn't talk about that last week. A bill of attainder means legislative acts, no matter what their form, that apply either to named individuals or to easily ascertainable members of a group in such a way as to inflict punishment on them without a judicial trial.
Sons of bitches.
Right there. Remember what that Bouvier's Law Dictionary said, that fictions, legal fictions, are abuses of the legislative acts from the bench. A bill of attainder is a special legislative act prescribing punishment without a trial for a specific person or group. So this is all Roman law. A bill of pains and penalties. A legislative act, though similar to a bill of attainder, prescribes punishment less severe than capital punishment. So what that's saying is capital punishment. A bill of attainder is punished by capital punishment. A bill of pains and penalties is something less than capital punishment, but it's the same thing, and they're included in the U.S. Constitution's bans on bill of attainders, bills of attainder. Article 1, Section 9, Clause 3, no bill of attainder or ex post facto law shall be passed. I think that's for the states. And then, no, that's the federal government. Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1, no state shall pass any bill of attainder. That's the state governments. A court can be a court of general jurisdiction for some purposes and a court of limited jurisdiction for other purposes. When, therefore, a court of general jurisdiction proceeds under a special statute, it becomes a court of limited jurisdiction for purposes of such proceeding.
Quad hoc.
Right, that's coming. Accordingly, where a court of general jurisdiction undertakes to carry out a special power, a decision made and exercise of such power is treated as a ruling of a court of limited jurisdiction, and the presumption applicable to a court of general jurisdiction that it acted within the scope of this jurisdiction does not apply. This is the one you're talking about, Vince. It is familiar law that when a special statutory authority in derogation of common law is conferred on courts of general jurisdiction, such a court of general jurisdiction becomes quad hoc, a court of inferior or limited jurisdiction.
But quad hoc, in the other one, they use the same language, except, because quad hoc means for this purpose. And then the other one, they didn't use the Latin terminology. They said for this purpose.
Oh, really?
Which is quad hoc. You see what I mean? So they just transferred the English verbiage rather than the Latin verbiage, right?
Yeah, why not?
Kind of like if you're talking,
Right,
like
right,
if you're in a debate,
right.
Like if you're in a debate and you say, okay, that's
Right.
Argumentum.
I didn't know what quad hoc meant, but now I know. Thank you very much.
Right.
I'll take back all those things I said about
I
you.
know it, right? You're probably right.
Many hours we stayed up talking about it.
Yeah, no joke. A republic, if you can keep it. To be the statutes which would deprive a citizen of the rights of person or property without a regular trial, according to the course and usage of common law, would not be the law of the land. A ministerial act is an act that a public officer is required to perform in a prescribed manner in obedience to the mandate of legal authority without regard to his own judgment or opinion concerning such as propriety or impropriety. When a given state of facts exists, discretion, on the other hand, is the power conferred on public functionaries to act officially according to the dictates of their own judgment. When acting to enforce a statute and subsequent amendments to the present date, the judge of municipal court, well, so then there's the operative word, municipal court, that means Roman law court, is acting as an administrative officer, right? Administrative means it's for dead things. and enforcing statutes do not act judicially, but merely ministerially, but merely acts as extension as an agent of the involved agency, and only in a ministerial and not a discretionary capacity. The Republic is the only form of government which is not eternally at open or secret war with the rights of mankind. My other videos, Bankster Thieves playlist, Roman cult playlist, bankrupt corporate so-called governments, bar members 1 through 9, do-it-yourself how not to volunteer for the selective service in the draft, martial laws here, do-it-yourself no income tax, do-it-yourself free mail, do-it-yourself kangaroo courts 1 through 35 now, Canada Border Pinks playlist, bar members and their satanic connections playlist. Roman law. It's the accepted rule not only state courts but of the federal courts as well that when a judge is enforcing administrative law, right, for dead things, they're described as mere extensions of the administrative agency for a superior reviewing purposes as the ministerial clerk for an agency. Judges have become involved in enforcement of mere statutes, civil or criminal in nature, that means Roman law, act as mere clerks of the involved agency. The word administration is synonymous with the word executive. The word administrator connotes of or pertains to administration, especially management, as by managing or conducting or superintending the execution, application, or conduct of persons or things. Thus, administrative acts are those acts which are necessary to be done to carry out legislative policies. That's where it's legislative. See that? And purposes already declared by the legislative body. In fact, it is common to use the two words in tandem. Bill of attainder. Yes.
So I was trying to find the history of where does municipal authority come from, right? And I was resigned to the fact that the UN was the only one who actually delegated municipal authorities, and so my question or my correlation I'm trying to tie together is have you come across something that would lead you to believe that municipal authority is originating from the Vatican, basically, or papal bulls?
There's lots of law dictionary definitions.
And what is the nexus between the Vatican and the UN that would delegate a municipal authority? In other words, where does it come from? Because they throw it in our face all the time, and if we knew where it came from, I feel like we could break it off in their posterity.
The UN operates under Roman law. Okay? And so if you look in those old law dictionaries, I could pull them up right now, and I could go into some of those old law dictionaries, and they all talk about civil law, Roman civil law, municipal law together.
Right.
So this is old as time itself. Okay? And so now they don't have to. That's the reason. I think that that's the reason the Pope was getting on King John's case, right? Because any corporation, by definition, I think that any kind of corporation is unconstitutional. Yes. And so, because it's a fiction. The Bible says that he doesn't respect fictions.
Right.
See, God doesn't respect fictions.
Yes.
And so we're not supposed to have fictions. Anyways, ministerial officers are incompetent to receive grants of judicial power from the legislature. Their acts in intending to exercise such powers are necessarily nullities. Where there's no jurisdiction, there's no judge. The proceeding is as nothing. Such has been the law from the days of Marshal Zelle. And that's 10 Coke 68, quoted in the U.S. Supreme Court case, Bradley versus Fisher. So you look at history. There was two things I hated in high school, two classes. I hated history and I hated English. And that's all I deal with nowadays, kind of ironic. Anyways, 1861, the Southern states walked out of Congress. Congress failed to have a quorum. Congress could not conduct business. And so therefore, on the 15th of April of 1861, under executive authority, Lincoln, a bar member, ordered Congress to reconvene in 12 Stat 1258. That was executive order number 1. And in 1871, Congress created a municipal corporation at 16 Stat 419. It says right in the act, says that it's for municipal purposes. Governments descend to the level of mere private corporations when take on the characteristics of a mere private citizen or a private corporate commercial paper and securities is concerned. For purposes of such corporations and individuals are regarded as entities entirely separate from government. Two national governments exist, one to be maintained under the Constitution with all its restriction, the other to be maintained by Congress outside and independently of that instrument. And that's Downs versus Bidlaw. So the 1871 corporation is operating under the Commerce Clause. Think about it. A republic, if you can keep it. So the Supreme Court ruled on a case that Lincoln failed to like. I thought it might have been Ex parte Milligan, but that was in 1866. I'm not sure when Lincoln got assassinated. I think, I'm not sure. Military tribunals cannot try civilians when civil courts are available. Lincoln sent troops to the Supreme Court and resulted in Rule 45 that exists to this day. So you go look it up in the Supreme Court rules. It says all process of this court issues in the name of the President of the United States. Yes.
I think that's more trickery. I think he's, as the President of the United States, is still wearing his commander-in-chief hat, and nothing has changed. We are still under martial law.
I think you're right. That's what I'm saying. I use that as evidence that there's really no separation of powers.
That didn't change anything.
Yeah, you're right. Right.
Yeah.
They have to tell you about it though.
And actually, when you go back to what you were just talking about with municipalities actually grew around forts, and by definition, they ceded their rights to the military in charge when the military said it was warranted. So again, martial law every single day of the week in your local city.
Right.
Right on.
Yeah. Yeah, so that would fall under international law from the law of nations. I'll bet you'll find that. Matter of fact, if you look in the law of war manual, the original Libre Code, the law of war manual, but the original Libre Code too, which was passed by, it was written by, sorry?
Libre Code, you're talking about the first 100 executive orders, it's called we have the Libre Code now, we're just out to executive order.
Oh, I know. No, but there was, Francis Libre was a law professor, and Lincoln asked him to write the law of war for the U.S. Army. And so the Libre Code, I'll bet you there's stuff in there about the municipal corporations, but it does talk about statutes being martial law. All statutes are martial law. It talks about a lot of this other stuff that we've been talking about in Libre Code. And so that law of war manual is now that thick, is basically, the Libre Code's in there, okay? The Libre Code hasn't been repealed, it's just been added to.
Well, and it doesn't get repealed because every single day of the week, we have a president adding an executive order. And the only time that a president can legislate from the executive branch is when you are under martial law. I mean, it is approved.
Right. I agree. You're preaching to the choir. That's one of the things.
Executive order is equal to the papal bull.
Yeah, right.
It's
right.
It doesn't have the same weight worldwide, but
no, but it has. Executive orders are just for government employees.
Right.
But if they can tie you into the government somehow, like by way of a social security number that's on the driver's license, you see what I'm saying? Then you're a government employee. So the United States, no joke, eh? The United States District Court is not a United States court established under the U.S. Constitution, Article 3. This is more evidence that there's really no separation of powers like you're talking about. It's not a United States court established under Article 3 to administer the judicial power of the United States, but was created by virtue of the sovereign congressional faculty granted under Article 4, Section 3 of making all needful rules and regulations respecting the territory or other property belonging to the United States. And that's Balzac versus People of Puerto Rico.
Another good resource that goes along with that is the Government and Accounting Office stylization manual that says what these courts are supposed to be labeled as, because it's stylization manual. And so how it was stylized in the Constitution is actually what has to be carried forward onto your indictment, and it never is.
Right, no doubt. Congress passed the Code of Law for the District of Columbia, 31 Stat 1189, March 3rd, 1901, which is now known as United States Code, and all courts, federal or state, operate under it. There's no common law offenses against the United States, only those acts which Congress has forbidden with penalties for disobedience of its command or crimes. Derogation of common law means that it's an inferior court of limited jurisdiction. Under Texas law, no act or omission is a crime unless made so by statute. The legislature may create an offense and in the same enactment provide exceptions to its application. Derogation of common law means it's an inferior court of limited jurisdiction. The republic is the only form of government that's not eternally at open or secret war with the rights of mankind. So think about it. They keep telling us this is a democracy, and what they're telling us, they're at war with our rights. You know, yes, Joe.
Would you, when it's appropriate, clarify the difference between the Clearfield Doctrine and Downs versus Bidwell?
The Clearfield Doctrine basically says that when they enter into commerce, they lose their immunity. The Downs versus Bidwell, that says a whole bunch of things. I mean, there's that one part of it that I use that talks about how there's two national governments, right? But the Clearfield Doctrine just basically says that when governments descend, see, the courts, they just deal with the issue in front of them, okay? There's political issues, okay? And they don't want to deal with political issues. I don't know if you remember that Brunson case. Okay, everybody's heard about that Brunson case. Well, 107 said in one of his videos, he said that the clerk in the court, he found out about that somebody told him that the clerk in the court heard Roberts screaming at the top of his voice, "We cannot accept this case." Because it's political, okay? The courts do not want to get involved in stuff that's political. And I'll probably talk about that here. The political department has to do what the executive department tells them. And so there's really no separation of power. But anyways, so you have to bring it up in such a way that it's not political. That's why I like the First Amendment, because it's not political. That's really straightforward. The First Amendment, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. That's not political. You see what I'm saying? A sunset, in its origin and action of tort, a sunset was soon transformed into an action of contract, becoming afterwards a remedy where there was neither tort nor contract. See, now they're talking about the stuff that a bill of attainder, right? Bill of attainder, yes.
So what about the argument of parents patre, the state is your mother, that they didn't teach you as your mother?
Yeah. Well, it's all tied in, but again, do you know who you are? Are you a subject or are you the king? You know, that's really what it comes down to. If you're the king, then they got nothing to say to you. If you're their property, then you're a slave. You're owned. You see what I'm saying? That's really what it comes down to. Either you're the king or you're a slave. I'm just checking YouTube, and there's not much here. So a sunset based at first upon an express promise, it was afterwards supported upon an implied promise and even upon a fictitious promise. Introduced as a special manifestation of the action on the case, it soon acquired the dignity of a distinct form of action which superseded debt. So now you think about it, they're talking commercial words here, okay? So it's commercial words, so it's Roman law, okay? Debt is Roman law. Bills of exchange, equity, okay? See, you have to understand also that in the causes and necessities for taking up arms, it says the king has extended the courts of admiralty and vice admiralty far beyond their ancient limits to supersede the course of common law and publish in the use the exercise of the law martial. So you have to understand, this is why that judge said you were crazy, because you were mixing your law. You cannot mix your law. So it's either law or the martial law. It's one or the other, and you have to be careful not to mix them.
Right.
And so equity, and I think I'm not sure if I have it in this presentation, but I think I put it. It was earlier on in this presentation where it talks about it. This is slide 136. Let's go back here. I think it was one of the first things that I. Right here. This is slide number 16. This is a war over the intrusion of civil law upon the common law. The court of Diamond v. Harris calls civil law, which is statutory law, superior equity. It's difficult to see how the courts of this case are to ignore the common law as a rule of decision when made so by statute and adopt a civil law, even though it has the merit of superior equity. And so that's an 1830 Texas case. And it goes on. In the meantime, civil law was the form of law imposed in the Roman Empire, which was largely, if not wholly, governed by martial law rule. Equity has always been understood to follow the law, as in common law. To have superior equity is to turn things on their head. This is exactly what happens when martial law is imposed. If equity is the law, then it follows its own course rather than following common law. Remember, we told that judge it was a satanic religious ceremony, and he said, yes, you're right. Because equity can follow its own course, thereby destroying the common law and leaving what's called equity in its place. And that's the non-ratification of the 14th Amendment of Judge A.H. Ellen to the Utah Supreme Court. Anyways, and we were on 79, no,
36.
Okay, thank you. Right. So, competed with equity in the case of essentially equitable quasi-contracts. Growing out of the principle of unjust enrichment, surely it'd be hard to find a better illustration of the flexibility and power and self-development of common law. Okay, and this is Roman law they're talking about. They're using Roman law. See, and so Roman law gets mixed up with common law in England. But you got to understand it's Roman law. And this is right here, talks about it. This is Salmon and Salmon jurisprudence, Sweeten Maxwell, England. Both in Roman and English law, there were certain obligations which were not in truth contractual, but which the law treats as if they were. They are contractual in law, but not in fact, being the subject matter of a fictitious extension of the sphere of contract to cover obligations which do not in reality fall within it. So it's talking about Roman law. Quasi-constructive contracts are based solely upon the legal fiction of law. They need that legal fiction, okay? And so they make their presumptions that you're the fiction. Remember, it's an administrative hearing, so only a fiction can show up at this administrative hearing. You see what I'm saying? That's why that guy, what he did was so powerful, because he say, I'm a beneficiary of a trust with that name. He's using their civil law argument. And he's saying, and I hereby appoint you to be trustee. And puts that judge in a really bad situation. And I demand that you settle this matter immediately.
And some people even said that the prosecutor is acting like the beneficiary, bringing fraud upon the court.
Yeah, or you can make the prosecutor the trustee.
You have to make the prosecutor the trustee because the judge can't be the trustee, he can only be the executor. And so when he comes in and he calls the name, when his role list is him being executor of all of these different things, and he is that executor. He becomes the executor des tort is the terminology to his own, dismay.
Okay.
But so when he comes in as the trustee, and so he's getting you to call out the name so that you identify as the trustee. Then he puts on his executor's hat. You're now the trustee, and now the prosecutor becomes the administrator.
Right. So
whereas as the beneficiary, you're allowed to assign those roles, and you can say, by the way, I'm going to make you the executor, special executor, for this purpose, right? Quad hoc, make the trustee for the prosecutor, because that's where he should be. Because that's why they're supposed to put up their bond to begin with, because they are in the trustee position.
Yeah, that's interesting. See, what would happen with this friend of mine that would do that is he appointed the judge to be trustee, and he said, now, are you going to perform your fiduciary duty, or do I have to sue you for breach of trust? And the judge would get up, throw off his black robe, and walk out.
Yeah.
Go back and say, what did he say again? I want to go back.
He said, when they called the name, he said, he would say, I'm a beneficiary of a trust with that name. That's what he would say. I'm a beneficiary of a trust with that name, because it's all trust law.
Yep. Because the birth certificate is your, whoever holds a certificate enjoys the presumption of law of having a perfected security interest. And so the gauntlet of legalization is registration, certification, securitization, and deposit. So until all four of those things are in place, it's not legal, right? And so when you hold the certificate, then you enjoy the presumption in law of having a perfected security interest in the matters pertaining to that. And so, nice little piece of information there.
Yeah, well, so, and that's not really an area that I'm expertise in. I try and stay strictly in law, but if they're gonna drag me in there, at least I got some options on how to deal with it,
Right.
But, anyways, it all needs a fiction of law. Okay, penal action, okay? This is more Roman law. A penal action is an action on a penal statute, an action for recovery of penalty given by statute. This is all Roman law. Where an action is founded entirely upon a statute, Texas Penal Code. Where an action is founded entirely upon a statute, the only object of it is to recover a penalty or forfeiture. Such action is a penal action. The words penal and penalty in their strict primary sense denote a punishment, whether corporal or pecuniary. Okay, we're going to look at what pecuniary is in a minute. Imposed and enforced by the state for a crime or offense against its laws. The noun penalty is to define forfeiture to be forfeited for non-compliance with an agreement. There's a contract. See, that sounds like maybe a quasi-contract. The words forfeit and penalty are substantially synonymous. A republic, if you can keep it. Pecuniary. A pecuniary cause, such as arise either from the withholding ecclesiastical dues or doing or neglecting some act relating to the church, whereby some damage accrues to the plaintiff towards obstructing satisfaction for which he's permitted to institute a suit in the spiritual court. You know those courts are all spiritual courts? Such, for instance, are the subtracting and withholding of tithes from the parson or vicar, the non-payment of ecclesiastical dues to the clergy as pensions, mortuaries, compositions, and the like. And this is Book 3 of Blackstone's Commentaries on the Laws of England. They're citing that, and this is Holthouse, A New Law Dictionary, 1850 edition. A penal action is one founded entirely on statute and brought with the sole object of recovering a penalty or forfeiture imposed as punishment for a specific offense, while remedial action is one brought to obtain compensation or indemnity.
Okay, so that leads me to ask this question. Do you think property taxes are pecuniary, or would they be penal?
It's all Roman law. That's all I need to know.
But it sounds like yeah, like that would be pecuniary because you're interfering with the usage of the land granted by
I saw a video. There was a YouTube video I was looking at this morning with DeSantis, the governor of Florida.
Right.
And he said, if you're paying an annual rent on your land, then you don't own it.
Right. Yeah. Agreed.
He said, I'm in favor of ownership.
Yeah. Right.
Everybody should own their land.
Right.
Anyways, a penal action is a civil suit brought for the recovery of a statutory forfeiture when inflicted as punishment for an offense against the public. Such actions are civil actions, on the one hand closely related to criminal prosecutions, and on the other to actions for private injuries in which the party aggrieved may by statute recover punitive damages. The Republican is the only form of government which is not eternally at open or secret war with the rights of mankind. So Article 4, Section 4, the United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a Republican form of government as one of we the people. The demand is a state in this union because we the people are the state. And this is Chisholm versus Georgia. The state does not owe its origin to the government of the United States in the highest or any of its branches. It was in existence before it. It derives its authority from the pure and sacred source as itself, the voluntary and deliberate choice of the people. A Republican form of government fails to include the District of Columbia Commerce Clause under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3 because of Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. The exercise of exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district not exceeding 10 miles square as made by session of particular states and acceptance of Congress become the seat of the government of the United States. This Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States, shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby, anything in the Constitution and laws of any state to the contrary, notwithstanding. That's where you can demand a trial by jury, which means the jury conducts the trial, and you can, the judges in every state, and notwithstanding anything in the Constitution and laws of any state. Every corporation, this is same in Canada, same as the US, same anywhere. Every corporation, for all its purposes, is an agency of the bitch. Well, the son of a bitch now, I guess, eh? Section 3, Government Corporation Operation Act of Canada. Section 2, definitions in this act, owned means subject to the regulations. If you're subject to the regulations, then you are owned. This is Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2, U.S. Constitution. Congress shall have power to dispose of and make all need for rules and regulations respecting the territory or other property belonging to the United States. A U.S. citizen is other property belonging to the United States. McCullough versus Maryland, all subjects over which the sovereign power of a state extends are objects of taxation, but those over which it does not extend are upon the soundest principles exempt from taxation. This proposition may almost be pronounced as self-evident, almost obvious. The sovereignty of a state extends to everything which exists by its authority or is introduced by its permission. But does it extend to those means which are employed by Congress to carry into execution powers conferred on that body by the people of the United States? We think it demonstrable that it does not. That's why you want to be a state national. The powers are not given by the people of a single state. They're given by the people of the United States to a government whose laws made in pursuance of the Constitution are declared to be supreme. Consequently, the people of a single state cannot confer a sovereignty which will extend over them. Nor does the conclusion by any means suppose the superior of the legislator to the judicial to the legislative power. It only supposes that the power of the people is superior to both. The sovereignty of the United States resides in the people, and Congress cannot invoke their sovereignty of the people to override their will as declared in the Constitution. A republic, if you can keep it. When a state forms a constitution right here, when a state forms a constitution which is approved by Congress, it's a stop to deny its validity. The action of Congress cannot be inquired into, for the judicial is bound to follow the political department. That's why, and this is an 1849 court case, that's why they don't want to get mixed up in politics. Okay, if it's political, they're not going to get mixed up in it. And there's really no separation of powers even before the Civil War. They routinely unlawfully arrest you with the objective of you exercising your right to resist their unlawful arrest, so the military police pigs can have an excuse to murder you. That's why I just get a police report. I don't say anything to the cops. That's why, Glenn Fern, you're Glenn Fern. Because what I do is I get a police report and then I file criminal complaints against, I get the names of the supervisors and managers, and then I file criminal complaints against the supervisors and managers and the city council and the mayor for suborning perjury, because they screen the cop for low intelligence and a propensity for aggressive behavior, and for attempted murder. because they intended that I exercise my right to resist their unlawful arrest with lethal force if necessary so they'd have an excuse to murder me. Yes.
So there was somebody that I know that went and also accepted their mission of their charter and used that against them as well with that.
That's possible. I haven't heard of that. They're engaged in endless wars to get you into their killing fields. Either way, their bankster handlers get to pillage all the fake money from the Treasury direct account. So they get a commission. If you look in the Code of Law for the District of Columbia, they get a commission for drawing a complaint, issuing a warrant to arrest, issuing a commitment. When they sell you into slavery, that judge gets a piece of the action. Entering a return, issuing a subpoena, drawing a bond, administering an oath, recognizing witnesses, transcripts. Why do you think the transcripts are so damn expensive? Because that judge is making money off it. Certifying depositions. It's all about selling you into slavery. Roman law is all about slavery. The fake judge operating under Roman law is busy making money by selling you into slavery, and the attorneys are working for them. That's how they populate the prisons. There are more people in Texas prisons as a percentage of the population than there are in Russia, more in the Soviet Union, more than communist China or in any other state. Sorry?
Fact.
Yeah, no joke.
Fact.
He's combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution, unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation. Gee, that sounds like Roman law. For transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses. That sounds like the minor estate. For imposing taxes on us without our consent. This is all taken from the Declaration of Independence. That sounds like the minor estate. For depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury. That's Roman law. For taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, altering fundamentally the forms of our governments. That's Roman law. Dictatorship. He's abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us.
Well, and so my question is this, and so this is, after the Magna Carta, once those thrones were abdicated to the papacy, then who's really, now if he's just leasing back those titles, then he's just a puppet for the papacy.
They all are. They all are. I'll bet you the papacy gets a piece of interest off of every interest that's ever, because that's all. Remember, under the Bible, they're not supposed to charge interest, right? And so the Vatican is collecting on that, and we're going to go into that here right now, right next. But I got to use the restroom, so I'll be back.
I'll get the mic for you.
Is to write, so the papacy has an embassy in Washington, right? And they have a guy assigned there. So I wanted to write him a letter and invoke my right as a child of God to be removed back to the proper kingdom. And my understanding is I've only met one person who's done that, but the problem was when they did it, they were unprepared with any trusts or any other documents, but they lost all of their identity in every computer database, all their social security, driver's license, everything was done after they walked out of the embassy. And so I wanted to know if you guys heard of that or had anybody done that.
I haven't done it, but I wanted, that's my end goal.
That sounds like that Ronnie James Dio song. The only way to go is down.
And I don't
You
know.
can release yourself.
And the church has their own dirty hands in this, going back to our, baptism certificates.
Right.
And so it's like, I don't know if those, if every single piece of paper that's been created since your feet were put on the ground.
Since they stole your soul.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
right. So really, what is the
That goes back to a papal bull that was created by Pope Innocent. That goes back to a papal bull that was created by Pope Innocent, and I think that I can't remember the name of it, but basically he claimed all the souls of Earth
and all souls that, you know, past and present, right? And he claimed all of the souls, right? And so this is when they began, and this was a long time ago because birth certificates have been going on in different forms, not in this country, not on the soil of this country, not until the formation of the Federal Reserve, right? But going back into other countries and nations, especially if you look back into Phoenicia, were the bond servants of Babylon, right? They also were chattel property. They were bond slaves, right? They were bond slaves. And so they would, you know, bond their children with a form of a birth certificate, which basically made them property. That's why this guy, Colonel Mendel House, you know, he said by the ancient, you know, law or rules of pledge allegiance. You know, it's all Masonic Luciferianism, and it goes back, you know, it all goes back to Babylon. I mean, you know, even to Babel, you know, to the original Tower of Babel, to Babel, right? The renewed kingdom was Babylon with Nebuchadnezzar, but originally it was Nimrod in Babel that conquered, you know, of course, he was of Ham, but he conquered Shem and Yafet's bloodline as well, right? Yeah. And so it all goes back to that. And so when you look at these, you know, when you look at the, absolutely. But yeah, like Shalom.
You got a comment?
I do, but you don't want to hear it.
No, go ahead.
It's not looking too good, that's all I have to say. People are waking up, but then they turn around and go back to sleep, or they watch TV, or they have a little Debbie cake with Diet Dr. Pepper.
What's wrong with that?
Yeah, resemble that one.
I own them. Which I doubt by
Okay, let's keep moving here because we got to get it done here quick so we can.
We have right now.
I know.
10 minutes.
All right, no dilly-dallying now.
That's right. Well, no interruptions. My history of the Jesuits is not eloquently written, but it is supported by unquestionable authorities and is very particular and very horrible. Their restoration in 1814 by Pope Pius VII is indeed a step towards darkness, cruelty, despotism, and death. I do not like the appearance of the Jesuits. If ever there was a body of men who merited eternal damnation on earth and in hell, it is the Society of Loyola. And that's John Adams, second president. Within 20 years, this country is going to rule the world. Kings and emperors will soon pass away, and the democracy of the United States will take their place. When the United States rules the world, the Catholic Church will rule the world. And that's Roman Catholic Archbishop James E. Quigley, Chicago Daily Tribune, May 5th, 1903. Roman conquest, that red text there is hard to read. That's when the pimp, well, I meant the Pope. No, I meant the pimp. Came to visit Congress, and that's Frank, okay? There's a friend of mine, Joe's sister. She didn't like him. She's devout Catholic, and she used to call him Frank, so I'll call him Frank. Anyways, 24th of September, 2015. So we'll start with this text right here. Right here, what it says is pointing at this military staff right here. It says, Roman Achaea military staff carried in battle by all Roman commands, planted on all conquered nations. And then this text right here is pointing at Biden, okay? Devout Roman Catholic, honorary degree from Jesuit Scranton University. And then this text right here, pointing at these two Roman fascists. Roman bundle of rods bound to a weapon, symbolizing subservient under the rule of a single man. And then this text right here is pointing at the speaker at the time. It's Boner or Beaner or whatever his name was.
Her name's Bonner.
Yeah. Devout, trained by the Jesuits, installed the first Jesuit chaplain to the house. And this is a picture that's much brighter and shows the two Roman fascists sitting there on the speakers next to the speaker's podium, and this Roman Achaia military staff. So,
Lincoln's chair.
Yep.
In the Lincoln Memorial as
Yep.
well. That's the chair he sits on.
Yeah,
His arm
Yep,
sitting
the
right on top
armrests
the
of his
back.
chair are fascist.
Yeah,
is that right? I didn't know
He was
that.
the first fascist dictator.
that's correct.
You know. he was the
Right.
first fascist.
Well, did you know there's a statue of Lincoln in the city of London? That's, in my opinion, he got rid of the 13th Amendment, so that made it so they're bar members.
Titles that nobody read.
Yeah. Anyways,
I would take $5 bills and write bar across his forehead.
yeah, no joke. Why do you think Donald Trump's first international trip included the Roman cult on the itinerary? And why do you think Pope looks so angry in his pictures with Donald Trump? Look at that. He's laughing and chuckling with Obama, but he sure doesn't look too happy with Trump, does he? Trump's going to cause him problems. Know your popes. After massacring the entire population in the Italian town of Palestrina, Boniface VIII indulged in menages with a married woman and her daughter and became renowned through Pope as a shameless pedophile. He famously declared that having sex with young boys was no more a sin than rubbing one hand against the other. The Pope Dante reserved a place for him in the eighth circle of hell. 37 of his own clergy members witnessed and professed against John the 23rd on charges of fornication, adultery, incest, sodomy, simony, theft, and murder. He also had a harem of mistresses in Boulogne, numbering 200, consisting mostly, if not entirely, of nuns.
There you go.
And there's Pope Francis committing idolatry at the feet of a Mary statue. Vatican New World Order, Herman Van Rompuy, the president of the European Council, stated recently, we're all Jesuits. He's referring to those prominent European leaders with whom he was developing a Roman Catholic architecture for the future of Europe. Makes wonder why the European Council and all that is just not doing so well, eh? Anyways, it creates unbreakable ties. So there is a Jesuits International, a republic.
Let's not forget the Georgetown University.
I know.
Jesuit University.
It is, yeah.
Let's not forget that, the whole Rump family.
Dum diversus. Pope Nicholas V issued the papal bull called Dum diversus on 18th of June, 1452. It authorized Alfonso V of Portugal to reduce any Saracens and pagans and any other non-believers, not Catholic, to perpetual slavery. This facilitated the Portuguese slave trade from West Africa. The same Pope wrote the bull Romanus Pontifex on January 5th, 1455, to the same Alfonso as a follow-up to the Dum diversus. It extended to the Catholic nations of Europe dominions over discovered lands during the Age of Discovery, along with sanctifying the seizure of the non-Christian lands. It encouraged the enslavement of native non-Christian peoples in Africa and the New World. We weighing all...
And Hebrews.
Sorry?
And the Hebrews. They were all in Africa at that time.
We weighing all in singular the premises with due mediation, and noting that since we have formally by our other letters of ours granted, among other things, free and ample faculty to the aforesaid King Alfonso to invade, search out, capture, vanquish, and subdue all Saracens and pagans, whatever, and their enemies of Christ, who wheresoever placed, and the kingdom, dukedoms, principalities, dominions, possessions, and all movable and immovable goods whatsoever held and possessed by them, and reduce their persons to perpetual slavery, and to apply and appropriate to himself as his successors the kingdoms, dukedoms, counties, principalities, dominions, possessions, and goods, and to convert them to his and their use and profit. By having secured the said faculty, the said King Alfonso, or by his authority, the aforesaid Infant, justly and lawfully has acquired and possessed and doth possess these islands, lands, harbors, seas, and they do of right belong and pertain to the said King Alfonso and his successors. In 1493, Alexander VI issued the bull Inter Serrera, stating one Christian nation did not have the right to establish dominion over lands previously dominated by another Christian nation, thus establishing the law of nations. Together, the Dum Diversas, the Romanus Pontifex, and the Inter Serrera came to be served as the basis and justification for the doctrine of discovery, the global slave trade of the 15th and 16th centuries, and the age of imperialism. From 1203 to 1805, 50 million Christians died, suffering at the hands of Rome because they believed in Christ alone. They died through Europe, especially Spain, for they saw all but Christ as vain, he who suffered by his death for men to save them from their awful sins. 600 years of martyred saints that history cannot erase. That iron heel and the iron hand, the Roman popes rule the land. The Rothschilds have been part of the Jesuit order since way before 1776. The Maltese Cross indicates memberships and allegiance in the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, a Masonic order created in 1099 by direct descendants of Roman emperors, of which the Jesuit order is a brand. The Pope claims you're not Christian if you own a gun. Well, I say he's not Christian, so how does he know? The sensational and horrifying account of the most horrifying religious massacre of the 20th century by Averell Manhattan. Averell Manhattan was the world's foremost authority on Roman Catholicism and politics. A resident of London during World War II, he operated a radio station called Radio Freedom, broadcasting to occupied Europe. Was the author of over 20 books, including the bestseller The Vatican and World Politics, twice Book of the Month, and going through 57 editions. He was a Great Britain who risked his life daily to expose some of the darkest secrets of the papacy. His book were #1 on the Forbidden Index for the past 50 years. Editor's note, this issue from 1986 and 2006, the record is now 70 years in the Forbidden Book list. The Vatican's Holocaust is not a misnomer, an accusation, or even less a speculation. It's an historical fact. Rabid nationalism and religious dogmatism were the two main ingredients. During the existence of Croatia as an independent Catholic state, over 700,000 men, women, and children perished. Many were executed, tortured, died of starvation, buried alive, or even burned to death. Hundreds were forced to become Catholic. Catholic padres ran concentration camps. Catholic priests were officers of the military corps, which committed such atrocities. 700,000 in a total population of a few million, proportionally would be as if 1/3 of the U.S. population had been exterminated by Catholic militia. What has been gathered in this book will vindicate the veracity of these facts. Dates, names, places, as well as photos are there to prove them. They should become known to the American public, not to foster vindictiveness, but to warn them of the danger which racialism and sectarianism, when allied with religious intolerance, can bring to any contemporary nation, whether in Europe or in the New World. This work should be assessed without prejudice as to the lesson, but even more vital, as a warning for the future of the Americans, beginning with that of the USA. Averell Manhattan, 1986. An armed Serbia could have easily prevented the Holocaust. Thank God for the Second Amendment to the Constitution, which guarantees the right to bear arms. Freedom of religion and armed citizenry go hand in hand, and is the only guarantee that this won't happen in the U.S. Editor's note, it is the Vatican's one world government that doesn't want you to have the right to own arms or use any means to defend yourself.
So
You know,
it's interesting to note, if you guys have not seen the most recent terrorism pamphlet, Christian identity, I think is #3 or #4 on that list. So if you don't think these Romans are at war with you,
yeah, right.
Christian identity, I think, is #4 on that list.
Yeah, I know. My brother's involved in that. Pope claims you're not Christian if you own a gun. This is the Jewish Encyclopedia, 1901 to 1906, Volume 2, page 497. It starts up here. It says, the Semitic influence of the Rothschilds by establishing a banking concern which should be essentially Catholic. And it goes on. It says, in a somewhat curious sequel to the attempt to set up a Catholic competitor to the Rothschilds, that at the present time, the latter are the guardians of the papal treasure. And so the Rothschilds are the papal guardians of the papal treasure. So anyways, When your government has all the guns, that's what it looks like with you there. Any society that would give up a little liberty to gain a little security will deserve neither and lose both. Just following orders, I was just following orders, is never a valid excuse or justification for immoral criminal behavior, and this lame attempt to abdicate personal responsibility should never be accepted as a valid excuse for such behavior. Pope claims you're not a Christian if you own a gun. Every great justice has been at the hands of someone just following orders. Order followers are the servants of evil. You assist an evil system most effectively by obeying its orders and decrees. An evil system never deserves such allegiance. Allegiance to it means partaking of the evil. A good person will resist an evil system with his or her whole soul. Order followers are the ones that keep the system of slavery in place. Mark Passio. A republic, if you can keep it. Some people will be like, I need more proof, I can't see it. Law-abiding citizens, brave soldiers just doing their job. Pope claims you're not Christian if you own a gun. Those who make their fortunes from you being sick are the same people who tell you what will make you well. Death by medicine. Actually, I think they say it's called death by medicide. Medicide, eh? Anyways, and that's not to say that all doctors are bad, but certainly a lot of their institutions are. The war is not meant to be won, it's meant to be continuous. When the government, why does the government want to ban semi-automatic rifles? Because they know you won't go into boxcars willingly. A republic is the only form of government not eternally at open or secret war with the rights of mankind. China established gun control in 1935. From 1948 to 1952, 20 million political dissidents unable to defend themselves were rounded up and exterminated. The illusion of left versus right, of free choice, is they both go to the slaughterhouse. The only reason for disarming the people is to make them powerless against tyranny. We will take your guns because we have made an agreement to do so called freedom from war. Oh, looks like my kind of girl, and I like her equipment. The United States is third in murders throughout the world. If you remove number 1, Chicago, number 2, Detroit, number 3, Washington, D.C., number 4, St. Louis, number 5, New Orleans, the United States is then 189th out of 193 countries in the entire world. P.S. All 5 cities have strict gun control laws and are run by communists. Pope claims you're not Christian if you own a gun. War is when your government tells you who the enemy is. Revolution is when you figure it out for yourself. So, original assault rifle, 1774, banned from import. 1775, British attempt confiscation. 1776, Declaration of Independence. When liberty and freedom are at stake, your silent isn't golden, it's yellow. They want you dead. I didn't say it'd be easy, I said it'd be the truth. It's time to get unplugged, folks. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the government, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, that's dictatorship, folks, it is their duty, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and provide new guards for their future security. A republic, if you can keep it.
How many more slides do you have, Glenn?
It's almost over. It's 2. Shut up and let me finish. The republic is the only form of government eternally at open or secret war with the rights of mankind. This is all the same things that precipitated a war of independence as currently constituted. All court cases are satanic religious ceremonies, inquisitions under Roman law. And that's the end.
Yay! Glenn,
Yo,
are you gonna do will you do a presentation on municipality eventually?
I can. Yeah, you want me to do one?
Yeah.
I'll request one on municipality.
Okay.
What is it? Where does it come from? Who are the people in your neighborhood?
You're out of jail.
I know, right?
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
these
Municipal
are the
corporations.
people in your neighborhood.
Okay, that's a good idea. I'll do that.
Hey, Glenn.
Yeah.
When you say a mark, what was that, Article 1, Section 1, what was that?
What?
A mark or a signature?
Yeah, that's in Title 1 U.S. Code.
Title 1 of U.S. Code?
Section 1.
Title 1, Section 1.